This is GAME News. Welcome back to GAME News. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's top stories. There is a complete game breakdown on I-96 from a Mutants and Masterminds 3rd edition Poorly Balanced Power. It is unknown when that will be cleaned up and ready to play again. A GM dies of old age, waiting for a single round of combat to end in a Pathfinder game. And finally, scrappy young teenagers from 1912 adventure and become the spirits of the century. Next on GAME News. Film in about 20 seconds. Hey folks, how y'all doing? I'm Kurt Wiegel, this is Game Geeks, and today we're talking about Young Centurions by Evil Hat Productions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a forerunner to their Spirit of the Century game, which was really the first time the Fate system saw the light of day way back in the back end. This was reviewed back in episode number 23. Go on and take a look if you want to see what I looked like, about 100 pounds ago, plus or minus. And God, many years. So in this, it is a game of pulp era high adventure. And the Spirit of the Century game ran on what I like to call Fate Dense, which is what powered that and the Dresden Files original game, not Dresden Accelerated, which we'll be reviewing in a few weeks. Now, this is a Fate Accelerated game, Young Centurions, where you are literally playing the younger versions of the signature characters from that setting, from Spirit of the Century. It's Fate Accelerated, which means it has a grossly pared down abilities list. You got your approaches: careful, clever, flashy, forceful, quick, and sneaky, my favorite dwarves. 3 stress boxes, 3 stunts, and 3 refresh. Now, one other thing I need to say about those stunts is one of them is considered a century stunt. What that means is that instead of a +2, you get a +3 because you sort of embody that very force of the century as it's going on. Now, let's talk about that. What are those forces of the century that you can embody? Well, the idea here is you're playing a young centurion. The centurions are born in that gasp of a second between December 31st, 1889 and January 1st, 1900. In theory, these characters will embody a very specific spirit or driving force of the century. Examples that they are given are in spirit of invention, freedom, charisma, courage, truth, justice, and mystery. Now, there are counterparts to that are born seconds before in the old century. These are the shadows. You can have the shadow of corruption or the shadow of leadership. Instead of embodying all that is good and wholesome and pure about that particular ideal, these are the opposite sides of it. I wouldn't go so far as calling them bad guys, although there's a very good chance they develop into it. But I believe it's more of, this is sort of the darker side of each one of those things. For example, the shadow of invention might be a weapons manufacturer, or the shadow of truth would be someone who runs around obfuscating the basic ideals of honesty. Now, if you're out there thinking this ideal spirit of things sounds a lot like the Century Babies from Wildstorm in their authority/planetary universe, you're not wrong. It's very similar to that. Okay, this is very much focused on kids in adventure, as opposed to our previous review, Bubble Gumshoe, which is very much about focusing on kids solving mysteries. They can do that here, but this is more about having big, high adventure while you're doing it. The basis of the game starts around 1911, 1912, where your character should be about, wait for it, 11 or 12 years old. That gives 3 almost eras of play for you to be in, and they are ranked according to movie rankings. For example, the G-rated game, your age is 12 to 13, there's little romance because the opposite sex is still icky, minimal violence, maybe a small little case of fisticuffs or something like that. These are straightforward, high energy stories where your parents are either away so you can do this or occasionally get in the way. The opposite end of that is the PG-13 story. This is when your characters are just about to come of age. They're 16 to 17 years old. And there's a stronger sense of romance here. Violence and death are a very real thing. You'll notice by then we were involved, the world was involved in a great war, and the adventures themselves are not straightforward, they're not simple, they're multi-layered, and there's often times where there's no one good choice. There are also mentors that can serve your characters. Now, these may have been spirits from the previous century or retainers of the Century Club. I always want to say Century Club, like Daria there. The Century Club, which sort of guide and organize the Centurions into a more cohesive force. The Shadows, I should point out, do not have a cohesive force that drives them. The rest of this is how to build adventures in the 1900s, how to involve the children, remembering that this is a children's game. So we don't need a lot of things like sex going on here. I like this a lot. I'm not a fan of the accelerated fate games. I think they're way too simplistic. My kids loved them, though, when I ran it for them. So I thought that worked out pretty well because I think that's kind of who this level of game is pitched at. Have a good day in gaming, y'all. I'm Kurt Wiegel.